work in SEAI and I manage the Sustainable Energy Communities Programme along with my colleagues Caoimhe and Julie. Tonight you'll hear the story of the Dingle Peninsula 2030 SEC, both from the community themselves and from researchers from MaREI. So MaREI is a state-funded research centre with a focus on energy, climate and marine research and innovation. So for anyone joining us, I'm just doing a very short introduction. I'll do an overview of how to use the system that you're all on tonight, and then I'll do some introductions. So there are no presentations tonight. This is what you're getting from all of us. We promised you an armchair chat and we plan to deliver that as best we can. We do intend to record tonight's event so it can be shared. We know there are a lot of other events happening this week and we want to share this story with as many interested people as possible. I will shortly introduce each of our speakers and panel members, but first I'd like to give you a quick guide on how to use this conference system. It's a software program called WebEx. So for those of you that can see, there are a couple of different options for viewing the panelists, and because there are no presentations tonight, it makes sense to try and use grid view. So we recommend you use this. If you hover over the pictures on the screen, you'll see a couple of little boxes up in the right hand corner. The one with 4 boxes on it lets you see all of the panelists at the same time. We recommend you use this. You can switch between views, but if you click through, you should find grid view very easily. For later on in the event, if you want to ask a question or if you want to make a suggestion, there is a couple of options. If you hover over the screen, you should see a Q&A bubble at the bottom of the screen on the right-hand side. So it's right in the far right-hand corner. If you click on that, you can submit questions by typing in here at any point during the conversation this evening. Tonight we have Evan Boyle who'll be checking for questions and sending them to both the facilitator and myself to share with the panel. There's Evan waving at you. If you wish your question to be put to the panel, please send your question to all panelists in the Q&A box. That way we can all see your questions and make sure that we can put them forward for the conversation. If you prefer to ask a question directly of one panelist, you can either include their name at the start of your question and then send to all panelists, or just send it directly to this person. Please note that Evan can't see everyone else's questions. He can only see the ones that are shared with all. So we will collate a document of all questions for sharing afterwards, and the panelists will get their questions sent on. So you will get an answer to your question. It's just a matter of whether they can be part of the conversation tonight or not. So we're up to 96 participants. And just to say, for those that joined us most recently, you're all very, very welcome. You're all automatically on mute and all of your cameras are off. And hopefully if you can use grid view, you should be able to see all of our panelists this evening. So in terms of introductions, we have a great panel of community storytellers here for you tonight. You'll get to meet the communities themselves, along with the different people and organisations involved in making the Dingle Peninsula 2030 as effective and robust as it is. The impacts of the Dingle Peninsula 2030 have been very well captured by MaREI researchers, and this brings together the learning briefs and case studies that are now available to all communities. They were included in the link and invitation to tonight's event, and it's an opportunity to share what works and what hasn't worked. At our national SEC event last year, we got to hear the story from Samso Island in Denmark. And this year, it's great to have a local story to tell. I hope you enjoy tonight and maybe see some ideas or inspiration for your own community. So tonight, your panelists include Deirdre de Vailish, who is the manager of the Dingle Creativity and Innovation Hub. She's in the middle right of my screen, so you should be able to see her name under her picture. Then we have Claire McGilligan, is the Community Engagement Manager at ESB Network's Dingle Project. We have Seamus O'Hara, who's the Area Manager of the Local Development Company, North East West Kerry Development Company, the SEAI SEC Mentor and Committee Member of Transition Kerry. David Garner should be joining us shortly. He's a Dingle Peninsula 2030 Community Energy Mentor and member of the Kerry Sustainable Energy Co-op. Dinny Galvin is with us. He is an ESB Networks Dingle Project Ambassador and a Dingle Peninsula 2030 Community Energy Mentor. He has also set up the West Kerry Dairy Farm Sustainable Energy Community. Claire Watson is with us as a Community Engagement Specialist in MaREI, leading the Engage research team exploring and supporting the work of Dingle Peninsula 2030. And then we've got Conor McCucken is the Energy Engineering PhD student with the MaREI team, and he's investigating participatory approaches to local energy planning. Our rapporteur for tonight is Brendan Toohey, a board member of Dingle Creativity and Innovation Hub, and he's also the chairman of MaREI and the chairman of EirGrid, and we're very lucky to have him here tonight to do the final wrap up for the event. The facilitator for the conversation today is going to be Brian O'Gallagher, who's a professor of energy engineering in UCC and co-director of the MaREI Centre. And then finally, our facilitator is Evan Boyle, sociology PhD student with the MaREI team investigating multi-stakeholder approaches to transitions. So just to say finally to those that have joined, we're at 110. You're all very welcome. I'm going to kick off and hand over to Brian O'Gallagher to start the conversation armchair style with our panelists tonight. So sit back, enjoy, and we'll be looking forward to your questions during the course of the event. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Ruth, and thanks very much to SEAI for co-hosting this event. I think it's an important part of Science Week when we consider the theme this year is choosing your future. And that's what we're seeing happening down on the Dingle Peninsula. I would encourage you, as Ruth says, to please do use the chat function, the Q&A function. And as well as sending questions, maybe if you have your own tips, tricks of the trade, things that you've used that works well, what we're really trying to focus on is engagement. You know, how do we reach out to people? Because that's a core part of the activity that's going on down in the Dingle Peninsula. And to kick us off, I'll start with Deirdre from the Dingle Hub. Deirdre, can you give us your perspective on how that's worked? How from your sense, that engagement, reaching out to people has worked on the Dingle Peninsula 2030 project?
Sure, Brian. I suppose it's been something that has evolved as we have evolved. If I remember back to the start, we would have initially, our first event, I believe, was the ESB Network's launch of the Dingle project here on the peninsula, which we held in the Skellig Hotel here and was very well attended. And I felt shortly after that event that a little bit further was needed. There was a lot of interest in the project. So I remember we held a family renewable energy open day event in the hub, so that we very much positioned the Dingle Hub as central to the work around the transition to a low carbon society. And that event was really about breaking it down for the community. Well, what did the Dingle project mean? I know we had local engineer Barry Bambury spoke at that event, and you know, there was a lot of people very, very interested to just find out that little bit more about what the project was going to be all about. And we moved on then through the project. I know Claire is going to speak a little bit more about the engagement process for the ambassadors and the recruitment process, but from the perspective of the local community, that was very important for us to find out who were the people who were interested in energy transition. So we worked very much in parallel with that project. And at the same time then, we started exploring what was needed in the agricultural space, because obviously agriculture is such a huge part of the peninsula here. We started working with the farmers to find out what were the challenges. We knew we needed to tackle emissions. We needed to tackle the fact that diversification of incomes was needed. And so we started conversation with Jerry Murphy from MaREI to understand a little bit more about anaerobic digestion. And so then we would have got very involved with the local festival who ran a farmers forum. And that was a platform for us for the past 2 years to engage with the local farming community to find out what were their needs around renewable energy and what was possible for the future. So it was an evolving process. It was really using the mechanisms at our disposal. It was finding out a little bit more about the opportunities that were out there, because it was always a strategy of the Dingle Hub to explore the employment opportunities around transitioning to a low carbon society and also around digitization. And so we have run numerous events since then. We've learned from other communities, lovely events like LED bulb swap events, quite simple ones to pull together, but really where the community are engaging in the conversation and they're starting to understand that it's one of the most effective things you can do to change out the light bulbs in your home if you want to save energy. We ran a standalone bulb swap in 2019, but this year, just before COVID happened, we embedded that bulb swap within a much larger event, which was launching our energy master plan. We've been very lucky to, I suppose, as it's built, we've had larger and larger numbers at events. We've had, I know Seamus will probably speak about these, so socioeconomic planning workshops that happened on the peninsula, where there was such a large turnout, such engagement from the community, all very interested in what was happening around them and wanting to feed into the process. That led on to the Energy Master Plan launch event, where we had over 200 people. So we were building that engagement, building that level of interest the whole time. And then, of course, COVID struck, but we've done quite a bit to move online since then, and started the process, I suppose, of vision building with the community. So we've, initiated projects and now building a vision then on top of it. So it's been a little bit of a parallel building the working groups at the same time as driving projects forward, and then trying to align the two where we see what the needs of the community are. So there's a lot going on. It's an evolving and emerging process, but it certainly builds. And I suppose the more we can show the community what's possible, what opportunities are out there, and what can happen, the more I believe the community are getting engaged and moving from engagement to participation and activation.
And just a quick follow-up on that, because you mentioned the events, the numbers have grown, which is a very positive, healthy sign of something happening. But what would you put that down to? Do you have a sense of why is, because that sign of success in terms of reaching more people? Where is that coming from, do you think?
I think it is on being able to deliver. So we started with plans for the future, and over the course of, say, the past 2 years, we've completed our Energy Master Plan. We obtained funding to do a feasibility study for anaerobic digestion, which we have completed. We have worked with the local farming and tourist community to look at short supply chain projects, and we have been successful in obtaining EU funding for that. So all along there's been little successes, and it's all moved in parallel with the ESB Networks project too, where there have been retrofits of homes. So there has been concrete activity all the time, which has really helped to engage people. And I suppose reassure them that it's not a talking shop. And that's really, really important. I think that people understand if they're going to invest their time in trying to make a change, that a change can happen and it is possible. And all of the activity that's happening here has helped to reinforce that and build that trust, I think, is really, really important, because at the end of the day, you're asking for people's time, and time is very precious, and you want them to commit to something that is achievable and realisable.
Thanks very much, Deirdre. Claire, let's continue that story. As Deirdre mentioned, one part of it was providing information, then getting engagement, having discussion, and then moving towards participation. And what's your perspective from the ESB activities in terms of the ambassador program, or any activities you'd care to mention in that regard? Sorry, you're on mute, Claire. Sorry. Oh, you're there.
Am I there? Can you hear me? Yep. Okay, well, thanks very much. And first of all, I just might give some background in relation to the Dingle project itself. So the Dingle project is one of ESB Network's flagship innovation projects, and it will deploy a broad range of renewable energy technologies across the peninsula. And we'll be working with the community to test these renewable energy technologies on our network. And the results of these tests and trials will then help inform ESB Networks in the design of a resilient, reliable, low carbon electricity network of the future. And in the context of what's happening in the electrification of heat and transport, that's all really important. The other thing that the project will be doing is engagement initiatives within the project to try and identify what's working, what's not working, so that we can really understand what will help our energy citizens take the step to become to transition to a low carbon economy. So as I said, we've had a number of engagement initiatives over the last 2 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit about our ambassador program tonight. And as part of the project and to make sure that it was a success, we needed to make sure that we had buy-in from the local community, because we needed them to work with us during the project to trial and test the technologies that we were rolling out. So I was thinking about this last night, and I think there are 3 key things that really made that particular initiative a success. And the first was ESB Networks recognised from the outset that the project would not be a success without the community buy-in. So they dedicated a full-time resource for a community engagement manager within the project, and I was lucky enough to get that role. So I'm full-time in community engagement, so we have a presence on the ground, and that's really helpful in terms of building relationship and the trust that Deirdre mentioned earlier. The second thing was we put a formal partnership in place with the Dingle Creativity and Innovation Hub, and this allowed us to solidify our presence within the community very early on in the project, and build on the existing information that was there, and build on the established relationships that the hub had with the broader community. So as Deirdre said, we would work very closely together. A lot of the events that we do, whether we're organising them separately, there are mutual benefits that she sees and under some of the initiatives within the Dingle 2030 programme, and we definitely get benefits as well under our own project. And the final and most important part of the ambassador program was the actual selection process around the ambassadors. And again, like, this was quite a robust process. It was really important for us to get the right people to work with us within the project for a whole load of reasons. And I think one of the first things that we did was we sent out a call for expressions of interest. We promoted the initiative heavily in local press and media and on the radio. When people expressed an interest, we got them to fill out detailed questionnaires. We followed up with phone calls, and then we had open nights. And I actually really liked these because, you know, it allowed people to come in and find out a little bit more about our project, ask any questions, and it also provided us with an opportunity to meet the people who were interested in the project. So that whole process was over 4 months, and it might seem like a long time, but I'm really glad now that we spent that time in selecting the ambassadors, because we have 5 fantastic ambassadors working with us now, and they represent a number of demographics across the peninsula. So we have got the farming community, we have a teacher, we have the hospitality sector, we have trade, and we also have a remote worker as well. So their key function within the project, I suppose the first thing is for them to test the technologies. So that's number one. But the second thing, and this is really important as well, is to share their experiences on their journey through the project. So they're currently making that transition to becoming, you know, an energy citizen to an active energy citizen, and making that move into, you know, becoming low carbon. So the experiences that they will share will provide, I suppose, lessons learned, you know, what worked, what didn't work. And we have a whole variety of stakeholders on the sidelines waiting to see what kind of comes out of their experience, because it's real people with real experiences. So Deirdre mentioned trust earlier. Like, I just find that that is really, really important when you're trying to bring people along. So they will be sharing their experiences with like yourselves, Brian, like with MaREI, for, you know, with the academic sector, like industry, policy and government. But the most important thing is for them to share their experiences with their friends, family and neighbours, because I think this is where real transition will start from real people that people can relate to, that they trust, and that are living that experience. And like, we've got Dinny Gavin, and I don't want to embarrass Dinny now in the phone on the call tonight, but he has just been a shining light in all of this for us. Like, he's really stepped up to the mark to being a true ambassador within our own project. And I think the fact that we took the time to think about who we wanted to work as part of the project. You know, we have seen the success within our own, but Dinny, I'm looking forward to hearing him talking in a little while, but he has just gone on to set the world on fire. And we're talking about activating energy citizens. I think we need to deactivate Dinny a bit, because he's involved in so much at the minute. But it's just, it's all about the people. It's about trust, and it's about, as Deirdre said, doing what you said you were going to do, and having those solid and tangible examples, you know, when people come looking for information, and I suppose, you know, looking to understand what's involved in a retrofit, or, you know, what's involved in, you know, what does an air source heat pump do. So it's great to have people like the ambassadors and the energy mentors now on the peninsula, to, I suppose, to disseminate that information, because it's much better coming from the community than it is from a big organisation. So,
thanks very much, Claire. It as you mentioned, it aligned very well with what Deirdre was saying, the trust part coming through, and you added resourcing, I think, which is also critical. Partnerships and the ambassadors it's been a very novel thing to do. I think the way you've done the ambassadors program, and as you say, you've been fortunate to get such quality ambassadors. But one thing you did mention was that you were lucky that ESB Networks offered you the job. We're all very lucky that you accepted the job. So thank you for that. I want to move to Seamus now. One of the things that Deirdre was talking about was this 3-stage process of information, engagement and participation. And I think one of the novel aspects, again, of this project is the many different strands, and the parish meetings that you organised to kind of discuss some of the topics and try and facilitate people to engage in the thinking and in trying to, I suppose, have a role in mapping out their future. So, Seamus, I'd love to get your perspective on your experience with the Dingle Peninsula project, and in particular, I suppose, the engagement aspects, please.
Thanks, Brian, and welcome everyone. Yeah, I suppose we, as a local development company, got involved in a socio-economic study within the peninsula, and there's 2 main elements to that. One is a sort of a desk research study undertaken by Dr. Brendan O'Keefe, and very much assisted by Conor McGuckin there, one of our partners. But you know, that's sort of looking at the quantitative demographic information around the peninsula, and I suppose that's coupled then with the meetings within the parishes, as you said, and we hosted 15 meetings in the place of communities, and that's very important when you go to someone's place. It's going to someone's house. They're in their own community, and they can talk about the issues, about the realities that impact on their community. And I suppose that's what local development is about. It's promoting sustainable community action. And I mean, talking or listening to what Deirdre and Claire are both saying, working with the farmers, I mean, what we are all trying to do is to build on what is already there as well. Because if you look at there's probably many people here tonight from Tidy Towns, you know, that we have Richie Williams, the Tidy Towns in Dingle, who everybody knows, involved in the chamber. Or you have John Kennedy in Dunquin, who's got a passion around eradicating knotweed. Or you've got other people involved in a whole range of, maybe it's organic farming initiatives, maybe it's Blue Ways in Clahan, maybe it's the conservation heritage work on the MaREIs, and again in Transition Kerry, delivering 6 courses throughout Kerry. So you have a whole embodiment of initiatives that we're trying to work with, to build with, because ultimately, if we can tighten the links between all of these parallel initiatives, we are developing and building sustainability for our communities. And I think that the diversity is there, and that's what we're trying to do, is to build on the diversities, because people have got passions around Teddy Towns, and that's running in parallel with someone else who's maybe a new member of an SEC. So how can we pool these individuals and groups that are working for the betterment of the community? How can we pool them together? And I think that's what our role is trying to build on what is a very rich fabric in West Kerry, and it's trying to ensure that they are resourced to enable themselves, to direct their future in a sustainable way. So I hope that answers the question in some manner.
It does. I think it's very interesting because it adds a new layer to what we've been talking about with regard to partnership, because it's not only the people here on the call partnering up together, but it's also accessing and seeking out the on-the-ground initiatives that are already there, and looking for ways, mechanisms to partner with them. One follow-up question I would have would be on the parish meetings. As you said, one part of the thing is to go there, and this is really a strong community development principle, to start where people are at rather than where you want them to be, and that's what you talked about in terms of geographically going to where they are, and I think that's an important dimension to it. Are there other dimensions, like if you're organising a meeting, how is it that you get people to come to the meeting, to attend?
Yeah, it's a good question, because tonight, for example, the MaREI's Conservation Association has got its AGM on at 8 o'clock, so they won't be here. It's that sense of a community connection and knowing what's relevant or important. And we would have, through NEWKD's work in West Kerry, we would have a small network of community activists which comes together every 4 to 6 weeks. And that's one level through which we communicate, I suppose, in the top-down manner from the board of NEWKD, but also from the grassroots up, that those issues that are relevant to the community are brought back to our board, and that there's a crossover membership from the community, what's called a local area advisory committee, onto the board of NEWKD. So you have this, this technical merging of top down and bottom up. And as all of us knows, there's lots of grey in between. But, Claire and Deirdre both talked about building trust and being available to people. And that's a big part, to be with people on this process, because the journey to address sustainability, and to develop resilient communities is an ongoing process, and it cannot be tackled in isolation. And it's the outcome of ongoing collaborations which gives us a much better process and series of potential outcomes.
Great, thanks very much, Seamus. I'll move now to Dinny. I think the story of moving from an ambassador, from first being motivated to become an ambassador, and going through that journey of then moving to the point where you set up your own sustainable energy community by gathering the dairy farmers on the peninsula. That's a very interesting, I suppose, story in how one piece of engagement can lead to another, and how certain things can grow. And to my mind, it's a very nice example of how sustainability can diffuse and grow its own legs. Do you want to give us your perspective on your experience with the ambassador program, and then engaging with farmers to set up the sustainable energy community then subsequently?
I will indeed, Brian, yes. I got involved in the Dingle ESB Networks project. Fabulous, absolutely. I always had a big interest in energy, and it just gave me the opportunity it just unleashed something inside of me, to be honest. And I love absolutely every minute of it. And, we've been getting educated as we've been moving along, and we're educating other people as well. That kind of led on from there to there was a course being organised, a community energy mentor course, and again, I just couldn't stay away because I was just interested in the energy side of it, and it was run by Kerry ETB, and there was 12 great people on it, and they have brilliant ideas. There's still good ideas within a lot of that group, and one thing kind of led on to another, and I got involved with the steering committee on the anaerobic digester there with the hub here, and that's a brilliant, and there's a fabulous study has been completed by XD Consulting there, and again, they were looking for people to be involved in the farm ambassador side of things, which would a lot of relevant information that would be great for just things like the local weather. We have weather stations and the local rainfall, the soil moisture and temperature, and we have sensors on some of the slurry tanks and some of the milk tanks and all that, and the information comes back to the phones, so it's absolutely brilliant. And if it will help going forward, that's going to be very important for the farming community. Again, one thing led on to another. I just, we did our energy mentor course, and we had fabulous speakers from the SEAI, and different people came and, gave us, explained, hydros, and we did wind turbines, and, we looked at heat pumps and all that. I had a little bit of a head start on everybody. I have a heat pump for about 15 years, so I knew how it would work. And I had a heat exchanger in the milking parlour at home, and I was telling everybody on the mentor course about it, and they actually came out one day and took a look. And I was saying, look, all the dairy farmers could have this. And so, look, again, a little light bulb came on inside the head, and I said, look, I wonder, is there any chance I could set up a dairy SEC? So, look, I put out a few feelers to the farming community. I'd be pretty closely involved with them, and got great feedback. They were very interested in reducing their energy on farm because it costs a lot of money to cool milk and milk cows and heat water and so on. So, I applied through the SEAI to set up a dairy farmers SEC in the peninsula. It consists of 107 dairy farmers who are very interested in it. We were lucky. We got an allocation from the SEAI to do consultancy on the energy usage. Basically, we're trying to decarbonize our energy usage. We've been getting, the farming community has been getting a lot of stick, about the extra dairy cows and all that. And look, I've always said, if you sit down with the farmers and work with them, they'll work with you. It's when you dictate to them and tell them they have to do A, B, and C, they run a mile. So look, I think that can be an awful lot achieved through this. And we're only a little peninsula of 107 dairy farmers, but you can imagine if the whole dairy community in the country would adapt some of these technologies and PV panels and heat exchangers and variable speed vacuum pumps, motors. There's so much that it would bring down their emissions quite a bit. Yes, we are contributing to climate change. Climate change is there. There's no getting away from that. I'm 30 years down on the farm. When you see wild roses budding out in the month of January, there's something wrong. You would never see that 30 years ago, things have been warming up. So by setting up the SEC and getting involved with the farmers and the farmers getting involved as well, look, we can tackle our emissions. We'll start with the energy, and hopefully we'll work on from there. There's an awful lot more that can be done. But again, work with us, incentivize us, and it'll reap its rewards. I'd be very confident of that.
That's great, Vinny. Thanks very much. I really like that idea of working with us, and don't tell us what to do. Work with us, discuss it with us, and provide us with the capacity to do it. And the enthusiasm and the energy you demonstrate is infectious, and it's great to see. And it just shows what is possible. So thanks very much for that contribution. I'll move now to Claire and Conor in terms of the maybe reflections. Claire first, on the sort of process of collaboration, perhaps, and how that's helped with the engagement, because collaboration has come across as a theme, and so it'd be interesting to get your perspective on that from your experience. I do know we're one of the energy mentors is supposed to be on, but he doesn't seem to have joined us. So.
Actually, Brian, that's what he actually is on audio. So I think David is here.
Oh, sorry, David, can you hear us?
Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes. Thank you, David. Do you want to give your perspective as somebody who was on Dinny and I think Deirdre as well mentioned the Energy Mentor course. Do you want to give your perspective on engagement and what's been happening down on the Dingle Peninsula from your perspective, please?
Yeah, for sure. I suppose just the background is just excuse me, just over a year ago, I think that we all started the course. So in terms of actually engagement for other people who might be thinking of running a similar course, especially if you're in the process of setting up an SEC, I mean, straight away, you bring together a group of different people, some of whom will know each other, some of whom won't. They'll all have different skills. They'll all have a bit of motivation for being involved. Some people really want to go and do a community energy project. Some people just want to learn a little bit about how they should retrofit their house or whether to go for a heat pump. But by going through the process of the course and going out into the community to see people's houses which have been retrofitted, we also got to go and see things like Temple Dairy Wind Farm. We became quite a strong group. You get quite a good sort of team building exercise. So you get a lot of engagement just within that group that can then go out and speak to their friends, go and speak to their neighbours, go and speak to their colleagues, to actually do a wider piece on community engagement. I think like a lot of all community organisations, we've been a little bit sort of delayed in what we want to do because of COVID. But we did have a lot of momentum from doing the course, so that was key. I would say the other thing is definitely having local heroes. You need people with credibility. Even though we've all done the course, I wouldn't be the one to go out and speak to my neighbours who are farmers. We all need people like Dinny who are basically honest brokers in their part of the community. And so that was a key learning for me from the course. You'll learn a lot of information if you want to do and set up a community energy project. If you want to set up an SEC, there's a lot of learning. Expand your network. That was the one thing I really got out of it. I'm now engaged with things like Kerry Sustainable Energy Co-op. A lot of people who want to get involved in these courses are probably already in that sort of area, people in the tidy towns and things like that. But it's a good chance to bring in new people who want to do something for their community. And that's the starting point. Wherever you're going to go, it's starting to build a group who can then get wider engagement. So, yeah, that's my key takeaway on engagement.
Thanks very much, David. And it's great that you were able to join us. And what I picked up from what you were saying was, in addition to some of the other strands that we've discussed already, is training, the importance of training local heroes, as you say, and I'd agree fully with you there, and the power of networking, and that feeds in nicely to the question to Claire on collaboration and how that can help with engagement in a project like this.
Yes, I mean, I think from the beginning, we as 4 stakeholders in the Dingle Peninsula 2030 group have been very good at working with each other. So we meet quite regularly. I think we're due a meeting, actually, maybe this will do. But and we share what we're doing with each other. The key reason really for that was we didn't want to confuse the community by each coming out and doing separate things and maybe contradicting each other or organising events in the same place. So we're collaboratively working on that level. But what's really interesting, I think, with this whole project is that It's what we're calling a hybrid project. So it's not necessarily top down or bottom up. It's actually engaging with stakeholders at the 3 different levels. And I think we certainly have to thank Brendan, because having worked in the civil service for many years, he has contacts all over the place. And we have been opening doors and bringing in people onto steering committees and into the various different projects that we have been doing, which has been very helpful. And also, you know, Deirdre and Claire are engaging, and Seamus, with stakeholders from the different agencies locally on the peninsula. But maybe I just need to also explain, Connor, Evan and I are involved in engaged research, and maybe people who are watching may not be quite sure what that means. It's where we, it's really the opposite of helicopter research, where a researcher comes into a community, asks a few questions and zoops back out again, and the community gains no benefit. So what we're doing is we're actually getting our feet dirty. So we're working with the group, and we're also collaborating and co-creating pieces of research. And as Ruth mentioned, at the moment, we're tormenting all the group to actually write these learning briefs. So we're looking at the different initiatives, the projects, and the different aspects of our work, and drilling into it just to see really what we can learn. Because I think very often groups, and I know myself from having worked in community groups for years, you never really have time to do the evaluation, and you don't really look at maybe what mistakes you're making, as well as what achievements you're having. So what we're trying to do in Dingle is drill in and to learn, and then to write it up, so that the learning that we're getting and the reflecting that we're doing will be useful to other groups and hopefully to policymakers down the line.
Thanks, Claire. And I'm glad you added that description, and I like that description of engaged research. Thanks for that. Connor, in terms of your perspective as a researcher working on a number of different dimensions of this project, what's your sense of the engagement aspects from your perspective?
Claire just covered the first thing I was going to say, which is why we're approaching it in this way. But just to briefly touch on that again, that research, when it's done wrong, is very extractive. So it just takes from a community. It goes in, does a survey or does a workshop, takes all the information and use it for its own analysis to publish its papers. Doesn't really give anything back. So that's why we had to set up this committee, so that we could try to give something back and let the analysis be a little bit informed by the community as well, which is really important. We spoke earlier about the idea of meeting people where they are, and we only spoke about it from a location point of view of actually like physically going to the community hall, but it's also quite important from an energy system point of view. I'm an energy engineer who is very much coming 3 years ago, only a technical side of things, would have laughed at the idea of working with a sociologist and a community development officer. I think back this time 4 years ago, I had to work with people in the business class in one of my modules, and I thought they were idiots because they're inferior to us genius engineers and our excellent solutions. But yeah, so I've learned a lot that way and changed my worldview. But we go back to that point about meeting people where they are. So when I wanted to do my research, it was to ask people, what do you think the future energy system looks like, and what is your priorities? But I was initially only thinking about that from a technology point of view. But by working with Seamus and broadening it out to that picture of, not just talking about sustainability from the point of view of climate change, but actually building a healthy and vibrant community, which you can't really separate it out. You have to have one to have the other. You can't just talk about retrofits and heat pumps and electric vehicles. You need to talk about what the challenges people have and where they see them going and what they see as a brighter future. So that, I think, it's been a really valuable thing from collaborating this way and getting that different perspective in there. And certainly has changed my worldview, my perspective a lot in the last 3 years. It's interesting when I reflect on that. And then, the other thing I want to point out is the resource that we've got from the collaboration. I think I almost put it in earlier because I really felt Seamus was underselling himself with that how you get people in the room, because I know he did Trojan work to go around and actually knock on people's doors, stand outside the post office, outside the shop, and make people, hello, I'm Seamus, I've got this event tonight, do you want to come along? And when you do that level of connection, it's very difficult then not to show up. So that, is a huge amount of work that, maybe goes unnoticed in a lot of things where we just kind of look over and say, well, that was a great success. And also Deirdre then in tapping into the schools and that. And Brendan, of course, as well, because he speaks fluent Irish. I'm a terrible Gael goer, so that is a real issue when you go into somewhere like Dingle.
Thanks very much, Connor. That was great. We learned there about humility, and we learned about the grafting associated with persuading, let's say, not badgering people to come to events. Okay, so we're now at a 8:15. We've 15 minutes left. We will have some closing comments from Brendan, but before that, essentially, you've heard a number of different perspectives, and I think a very rich story unfolding, certainly from how I was hearing it, in terms of the different dimensions to what's going on in engagement on the Dingle Peninsula, and that journey from information to engagement to participation, the need for trust, resourcing, partnership, the role of ambassadors, the role of engaged research, and action being an important part of it in terms of doing what you said you would do and showing results and being able to feed that back. That from these kind of things, these are some of the dimensions to I think where we're seeing the success in terms of the level of engagement that's happening associated with this project. So I'm going to hand over to Evan, who's been tracking the questions and comments from the floor. And if we don't, any question or comment that we don't get to this evening, we do have a written agreement from everyone before tonight's proceedings that they will engage further after the hour to effectively address any points that are raised from the floor, and so that we can gather that into a useful document that we can distribute. So, Evan, I'll hand over to you.
Yeah, so there's a couple here. The first one maybe we'll pose to Deirdre, and then the wider group as well if people want to come in on this one. But Claire has said in the chat, with so many initiatives, opportunities, multi-agencies, organisations and companies involved in Dingle, how have you managed to coordinate and avoid duplication, energy citizen confusion, or working at odds with each other? What's worked for Dingle?
I'm so glad you gave that to me, Evan, because I was actually trying to answer it on the chat, but for some reason it wouldn't go through. That was a great question, Claire, because I suppose we were always concerned about that first day. I think it is one of the reasons for being of the Dingle Peninsula 2030 group. It's why the four of us, Dingle Hub, MaREI, ESB Networks and NEWKD, met so regularly so that we could do just that any initiatives that we were trying to run would be complementary to each other. I'd like to think we've succeeded quite well in that, you know, Seamus's socio-economic planning fed so well into the work that we were trying to do. We've always worked very closely with the ESB Networks project, so it was aligning all of those and making sure that one enhanced the other instead of working at odds. Now, to the second part of your question, as in causing confusion, I've always kind of had that at the back of my mind. We have definitely caused levels of confusion among people with the amount of activity and what's happening here. Now, it is starting to come together quite a bit, and with, I suppose, the funding from Science Foundation Ireland this year for activating the Energy Citizen Project, we've been able to draw it together in a good communications package, and then we have a website for Dingle Peninsula 2030, and we were able to launch it. So we are able to pull the story together that people understand it is tackling the transition, but also sustainable communities from a holistic aspect, and it's looking at it in a number of different areas. And as Conor quite rightly pointed out, you can't take one thing on its own. You can't simply go in and tackle energy. You have to understand that there are emissions causing concern in the agriculture community, and how do we deal with them? There are sustainable transport issues, very, very important to the community here. So it is holistic. We've tried to pull it together under the Dingle Peninsula 2030 umbrella, and I hope that we can lessen the confusion as we move forward.
Thanks, Deirdre. So yeah, outlining that alignment, but also there has been some confusion and kind of overcoming it as you move through it. I have two questions for Claire McGallagher, I think. So Julie says, great opportunity from ESB. Does ESB have plans to pilot with other SECs across Ireland? And then also Eva says, what are your main learnings so far? And that's for Claire McGallagher, I think. You're muted.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Brilliant. Okay, well, to answer the first question, I'd love to be saying yes, but I'm not aware of any projects like Dingle in the pipeline at the moment. But we do have a lot of innovation projects underway within ESB Networks. And I know, Tanya, sorry, pardon my typos. I was trying to respond to you on my mobile, but if I can refer people who are interested in those innovation projects, if you go to our website, www.esbnetworks.ie, under innovations, you'll see quite a comprehensive list of information around all of those projects. But currently, I'm not aware of any projects like Dingle in the pipeline for further SECs. And your second question, then, sorry, Evan.
Main learning so far.
Oh, right. Okay. Now, I know that Deirdre and I often talk about this as well. And Deirdre, you're so immersed in the community energy space, and I'm kind of dealing with individuals one-on-one. So what I'm finding in relation to people who really want to make the transition to low carbon and become active energy citizens, and we've mentioned that, and I don't know if we've really explained what an active energy citizen is. And this is somebody who will change their behaviour to cause a positive impact on the electrical network. So we have lots of people. I think the Dingle project and Dingle 2030 as a whole has created an awareness of active energy citizens within Dingle. But people want to make the change, but there are lots of obstacles, and the obstacles that I'm seeing are, I think, first of all, it was the information piece and not really understanding what would be involved in terms of a retrofit, the benefit of a heat pump and solar panels. And we identified that as an issue early on in the project. And as Deirdre mentioned, we now have 10 energy ambassadors out in the peninsula, being able to educate people around the various different types of retrofits you can get and the different types of renewable energy technologies as well. So independent information would be one. Cost is a barrier too, because people want to make a transition. They want to drive an electric car, but the initial outlay cost for a new electric car is quite expensive. And like if you're looking at a retrofit, depending on what you want to do, you're talking about 40, 50K at a minimum. So I think cost, information, and it's a big undertaking. It's a big undertaking. We're after coming through 3 retrofits at the minute, and we've had the usual kind of ups and downs with 2 of them, but they all went pretty standard. But then with the 3rd retrofit, we encountered a lot of issues. There was delays with the processing of the grants in June, so the retrofit got delayed until October. We ran into troubles with the roof. Then there was really bad weather. Then you had Christmas. Then there was a family circumstance, which, we stopped work for a week in January, February, and then you had COVID kick in. So it is a big commitment when you're looking to undertake a retrofit. So I think, to answer your question, it's information, independent information that they can trust, cost, and then, as I say, it's just a big commitment to have that kind of disruption in your house as well if you're looking at a retrofit.
Okay, thanks, Claire. This question, maybe if someone wants to jump in, who's most fitted to answer it, maybe Deirdre again, but I'm not sure. So could you expand on the Energy Mentor course?
Yeah, I can certainly. So we worked with Kerry Education and Training Board because, as Claire, just to Claire's point there, we realised that people needed trusted information to make the first steps. There is a ton of information out there. The SEAI website is wonderful for everything that you need, but people want to know information that is specific to their circumstances, I suppose. And we recognise that, and we recognise the need for giving, I suppose, a number of building the team, as David had said, on the peninsula. So we worked with that principle. It took us a long time. We're in the process of reflecting on that whole course. It took us a long time to find the right way to deliver it. And we settled on a 12-week part-time course. And I think its strength was the people within the community that it attracted. We got a lot of support from SEAI, who delivered a lot of the material of the course. So we would have learned about establishing the planning for communities, We would have learned a lot about insulation, solar PVs. So you're getting that extra level of information that your normal citizen might not have. Plus, what I think the mentors have out of it is they know where to go for specific information. So if somebody wants to focus in on insulating or upgrading, renovating an old house, I think there's a couple of mentors, I'm thinking of Joe in particular, who'd be great to speak to about that. Sit down, have a cup of coffee with them and say, well, this is what my house looks like. What do you think it needs? It's not that you can give certified technical advice or anything. You can simply point people in the right direction. Now, I should say that at the end of that course, that's exactly what we realized. People are not certified to be advisors. And so we have looked a little further at that, and we have a local energy engineering graduate on the peninsula undergoing the BER assessor training and the SEAI registration process for technical advisor, sponsored by ESB Networks, which is a lovely add-on to that, so that that person can provide the technical advice that's needed for those who want to take the next step. So the first is a conversation with your community energy mentor to get your head around what you need. The second is to go and get your certified technical advice for how to proceed. So if that's an add, so if that helps, as I said, the course and the material evolved as we realized what was needed. There was a lot of site visits on it as well. So it was giving people that extra level of understanding around renewable energy and around energy efficiency.
Thanks, Deirdre. I'm just wondering, Brian, do we have time for one more?
I'd say not in terms of, we will be providing more answers to these questions and load them, but I'm conscious we've told people till 8:30, so I think we should try and stick as closely to that as possible.
Yeah, so there's some left and we'll get everyone to input into them and send them out afterwards.
Great. So I think now we'll move to Brendan. Brendan, do you want to give some closing remarks and reflections on what you've heard? Thanks. Sorry, Brendan, we can't hear you actually. It might be better if you turn off your video. It could be if it's a bandwidth issue. So, we still can't hear you. Sorry, Brendan.
Living on the Dingle Peninsula. By 1850, there were 30,000 people. Okay, can you hear me now? Ryan, can you hear me now?
Perfect.
Oh yeah, that's better. Yep, yes.
Brian?
Should we turn off our video as well?
Brian?
Yes, we can hear you now, Brendan.
Here. Okay, let's try again.
You can't hear us, but we...
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I can hear you, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
Today there's 12,500 people living on the Dingle Peninsula. So in some ways, what you're up the western seaboard. And tourism is about 30% of the economy of the Dingle Peninsula. It's 20% for Kerry as a whole. So it has particularly suffered from the COVID issue, obviously. So that's the background. And one of the challenges when this project came about day one was about looking at the economic side of it. And then it was decided to set up a hub. And coming out of that, the idea that you can only do this if you position it in the context of the transition to low carbon. Brussels has picked this up recently with the EU Green Deal. And Europe now is moving on two-pronged approach, digitalization and the whole climate agenda. And I suppose what you're listening to there today, you've heard some of the story today from the various side on the energy side, but there's a parallel story around digitization and the hub and what that's doing. So I suppose one of the messages I'd sort of give to people is that you just shouldn't see it in a singular context. You've got to look at this in the broader round. And I think it's a really interesting opportunity to say, Deirdre, that there's been an ongoing discussions with the Department of Community, Rural and Community Development, and really saying that, look, if you're going to develop the communities, you can put all the capital projects you want to and provide funding for capital to Dinny till the cows come home. But that won't change it really. It's about putting people on the ground. And I suppose when people asked earlier, and I think Claire asked the question about how can this come together, I think really it's true. The work Deirdre does as the pivot of all this, everything feeds through Deirdre, and she's funded under the Regional Development Fund, going back over a series of projects. But that was designed for the Dingle Hub, and it was coming out of that and having somebody there where people can come to and find that they're available and they're full-time. So trying to do all these things on the basis of volunteers is limited, and it's very challenging. It's the first, I suppose, point I'd make. The second one is that Conor talked earlier about the Energy Master Plan, which Conor obviously was very involved in doing. Over 50% of the energy used on the Dingle Peninsula is transport. So the next big challenge we have is in that area, and we'll hopefully be announcing something on that before Christmas. But so sometimes you think it's one thing, but it's not necessarily. You've got to see this in the round. You've got to realize that, yes, there are a lot of pillars here. It's quite complex, and you can pick off projects, but you've got to see what the ultimate game is here. And when we take it from the community, from the country's point of view, when we're trying to hit targets by 2030, significant targets by 2030, to do that, and 10 years sounds a long time, and it isn't, as we know, but to do it, the type of changes that are going to be needed, not just on the Dingle Peninsula, but elsewhere as well, will be really challenging. One of the challenges and one of the real benefits we've had from linking the research into this, and Claire has talked about this, and Conor and Evan, and I think yourself, that there's two elements of research here. That there's the engaged research that Conor has talked about and Claire has talked about, but out of these, there's policy briefs come out of these. They're not the peer-reviewed journals and stuff like that, but they're short papers that are available to look at specific issues, and they feed into policymakers. And I see, I think Enda Gallery's on the line tonight from the department, one of the people, I'm sure there are others hopefully as well, but Enda has been a great resource, I think, to many people around the country with a commitment to community engagement and understanding the importance of that. And it's giving support to people like that and St. John O'Connor in the Department of Rural and Community Development, showing the empirical evidence that if you do this, these are the type of policy changes that you could introduce with the type of results you can get. So the research is really important here, the peer-reviewed and the what we would, I suppose, call the policy briefs. And the third element then, people talk there about Kerry Education Training Board and the course. What we found was the total willingness from the different agencies to do things if they're asked. And Kerry Education Training Board funded this project themselves. But as Deirdre said, the course and the material is available and can be shared. There's no problem on that. But I think starting to engage with the system in the broad sense of the local authority and the health and the education training boards and others, that's what they want to do. They all want to engage in this space, but you've got to go to them and approach them. I think they also need to learn, I suppose, how to deal with that. So it's a big challenge for them as well, because the time frame is very, 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 very challenging. And I suppose the underlying message then in all of this is that the changes that are going to happen over the next 10 years are absolutely going to be very dramatic and very substantial. Wearing, if I can for a second, wearing my EirGrid hat, we know when we're looking at what the future of the power system is going to look like by 2030 with increased electric vehicles and increased heating and more offshore energy, and that there's going to be fundamental changes to the way energy is delivered. And that is going to give real opportunities to think about the country that's not all centred on Dublin. In other words, to build into the spatial planning the idea that there are opportunities around the country in small communities. We've seen a bit of that with the move on the on remote working and that. So linking, my strong suggestion is to link the remote working initiatives and the digital hubs that are being pushed by the Department of Community and Rural Development, and linking those with the SECs, the 400 plus SECs going up to 1,500 SECs. They're the same type of people get involved in both of these. There's a real opportunity to leverage off both of them, because they're all going to deal ultimately with the same things, about building community. Seamus has talked a lot about, and Seamus is the living expert on building community. That's what he does, and does it in Dublin. It's cappuccino by cappuccino. It's cup of tea and scone and cup of tea and scone on the Dingle Peninsula. So but it really is about spending time with people and engaging with people, and it's about empowering the local communities to take ownership. So I think part of the thing, if I was to leave some sort of final messaging, it would be around communities taking ownership of their own vision for the future, positioning that as a transition, but also bearing in mind the digital economy. And that includes the farming that Dinny talked about as well. And then seeing the future, if the future were a book, I remember saying this to someone recently, do you want to be reading it or do you want to be writing it? I think most of the Irish communities want to write it. They don't want somebody else they don't want someone else writing it for them. So this idea about taking ownership of that, empowering the communities, and what we've been lucky tonight is we've watched a lot of people giving their views here on the group. And I want to pay tribute to that. I want to pay tribute to the professionalism. A lot of this work is done on a voluntary basis. That doesn't take away from the professionalism, not just here, but around the country. The huge commitment which you can't buy, or the passion. So we're talking then about building communities. We're talking about building innovative communities that are open to learning and learning about doing things in a new way, the way Dinny described it there and the way that Deirdre described it. And part of that then, the education side of that and the innovation side go hand in hand with the type of future we're talking about. And finally, it's about leadership. And I just want to pay tribute to the ESB, and Claire is on tonight, Claire Duffy as well is on, I know. And this wouldn't have happened without the support of the ESB and the ESB networks, SEAI from Ruth and the team there, and the willingness to come in behind it. MaREI, Brian and the team below there with Claire and the others. And then the NEWKD from Seamus, and of course the local community and the leadership locally that Deirdre brings to it and pulls it all together. So I think the willingness to be open to learn, nobody has a monopoly on wisdom here, but the willingness then to share that, and that's the challenge for all of us, and to realize that we're really at a very pivotal time for creating a new vision for the country and even beyond. So will I leave it at that and just say thanks, Brian, and thanks to the team there.
Thanks very much, Brendan. That was lovely and we really appreciate your words. I just want to also thank all of our speakers tonight as well. We will send out the link to the recording probably Friday or Monday, as well as links to the various learning briefs that have been developed and any other information that people have asked for in the question and answer session. So just finally to thank Brendan, Brian, Claire, Deirdre, Dinny, Seamus, Evan, Connor and David tonight, and my own colleague Anya for helping us set it all up. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, and I really can see us coming back next year with part 2 of, I'd say, 10 parts with the ambition that's been expressed and the achievement so far. I think it's made for a really interesting story and we really hope you enjoyed it with us. So thanks indeed and good night, and hope everyone stays well. Thank you.
Thanks.